Well, a very sad day for many people around the world with Steve Jobs passing, and we all know what Steve Jobs and Apple accomplished, but we don't know a lot about Steve Jobs' personal life, what the man was like. So let's learn more about that with John Sculley. He was a former CEO of Apple. He worked every day with Steve Jobs for 3 years. John, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Poppy.
Let's just start. Do you have one distinct memory of Steve Jobs, or one word, one feeling that you think describes the man as a whole?
I'd say the one phrase is that Steve really, really cared. He cared about the human race. He wanted to make a dent in the universe. He believed that he could create products that would do exactly that. And it was all about no compromises. And what I learned, Poppy, back in those early days, remember Steve was 27 years old when I first met him in 1982. And those first principles that I learned from him working as his partner in those early days are the same first principles that I can see in how he leads Apple right up until the end. And so this is a man who was driven by principles, who never cared about money. We never had one discussion about money.
Really?
He never cared about personal possessions. No. What he cared about was making products that were going to make a difference in people's lives. That's what drove him.
Let's talk about that a little more, because there is a very now famous conversation between you and Steve Jobs. You were standing, I believe, on a balcony in an apartment that he had on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. He was trying to woo you, I believe it was 1983, to come in as the CEO of Apple. And you told him, I'm sorry, Steve, I'm going to be the CEO of Pepsi. I'm not going to take that job. What did he say to you?
As we stood out on the balcony, I said, Steve, I've thought about it a lot. And this was a 4-month relationship that we had at that point. And I said, I'm going to stay at Pepsi. I'll be an advisor to you. I'll do it for free. But I think I belong back here on the East Coast. And there was this long pause. And Steve was dressed in his classic blue jeans, running shoes, and mock black turtleneck sweater. And he looks down, then he looks up at me, and he has these very piercing, deep brown eyes. And he says slowly, do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world? And it's an example of Steve's ability to find the right message at the right moment.
You and the board of Apple essentially pushed Steve Jobs out of the company that he founded back in the 80s, and you've called that the darkest hour of your professional life. Explain what you mean.
Well, I was brought into Apple at a time when the Apple III had failed. The Apple II was the only cash generator in the company. It was outsold by Atari and Commodore, each by 2-to-1. And the company needed cash flow in order to give time for Steve to create the Macintosh and then to launch the Macintosh. I didn't know anything about computers. I was brought in because I knew something about marketing. And so we kept the Apple II alive for 3 more years. I was also brought in to help bring in consumer advertising. Pepsi Generation and Pepsi Challenge were experience-centric advertising themes. So Steve and I were totally aligned on those 2 ideas. Where it broke down was in 1985, the Macintosh Office, which is what we called it at that time, was just not powerful enough. The processor technology just wasn't there yet to be able to really be a functioning tool the way Steve had envisioned. And our disagreement was over Steve wanting to lower the price of the Macintosh. And I said that we had to leave the price of the Macintosh alone because we couldn't build any more, even if we could sell them, and that we had to focus on the Apple II. And Steve didn't want to focus on the Apple II. He wanted to focus on the Mac. We went to the board. The board did an investigation for several weeks, came back and agreed with my position and asked Steve to step down from running the Macintosh division. You can imagine what an incredible blow it was to the founder of the company, the largest shareholder, the chairman of the board, to be told to step down from the Macintosh division. And Steve never got over that. in hindsight, it was a terrible mistake for Steve to be pushed out. I clearly was not skilled in being able to build technology products, so I had to surround myself with others, and the reality was there was no one ever as good as Steve. When I left Poppy, Apple did become the largest selling PC in the world. It had $2 billion of cash, and it had grown 1,000% on the top line. But it, I think, would have been an even better company if if the board and I had figured out a way to keep Steve there.